This is GPS, the global public square. Welcome to all of you in the United States and around the world. I'm Fareed Zakaria. We have a terrific show for you today. We will start with an exclusive interview about the interview.
Take him out.
For coffee? Dinner. For kimchi?
That's the movie about North Korea's Kim Jong Un that has created a firestorm. It involves cyber war and the freedom of expression. I will talk to the CEO of Sony Entertainment, the man with ultimate responsibility for the film and the company that was hacked. Then, the rest of the world-shaking news from this week. Cuban-American relations on the road to normalization.
Has not worked.
The collapse of the Russian ruble. The resurgence of the Taliban. We have a world-class panel to talk about it all. But first, here's my take. This has been a week where big news has been exploding. We will get to all of it, but let me tell you about the thing that most agitated me this week, the response to the cyber attacks on Sony Pictures. Now that U.S. intelligence officials say they believe North Korea was behind those attacks, the discussion has finally moved away from emails about Angelina Jolie to the real story, which is far more troubling. One of the nastiest regimes in the world has effectively threatened to launch terror attacks in America if an artistic work were to be shown publicly. And stunningly, almost everyone involved has caved. Imagine that the Iranian government had threatened a terror attack on U.S. soil if, say, a book were about to be released that parodied its supreme leader. Would we not regard this as an intolerable surrender to threats of terror and a violation of core principles of freedom of speech? Yet when confronting an almost identical circumstance today with the Sony movie The Interview, the reaction has been very different.
You want us to kill the leader of North Korea?
Yes.
What?
After the country's largest theater chain said they would delay the film's opening, Sony announced it would officially cancel its December 25th release. Other movie studios did not rally behind Sony. In fact, Deadline magazine reported Wednesday that another movie set in North Korea, a thriller starring Steve Carell, has been canceled. The stars of The Interview canceled all their media appearances. It could be said that this movie is just a comedy. But Charlie Chaplin's The Great Dictator was also a comedy, satirizing an evil maniac, Adolf Hitler.
Now let us fight to fulfill that promise.
And it's worth remembering that when Chaplin's movie was being made in the late 1930s, according to the documentary The Tramp and the Dictator, Neville Chamberlain's government wanted to ban its distribution in Britain, all in service of its policy of appeasement toward Nazi Germany. By the time the movie was released in 1940, Britain was at war with Germany and everything had changed. Why does the terrorist threat from North Korea produce appeasement and indifference, whereas threats from Islamic terrorists produce courage and defiance and resilience? I suspect that it's because we are fully aware of the barbarism of jihadi terrorists. But we tend to think of North Korea in somewhat comical terms. The odd dictators with their strange haircuts, the weird synchronized mass adulation in stadiums, the retro propaganda and rhetoric. In fact, North Korea is one of the world's most repressive and brutal dictatorships. Estimates are that it allowed 1 to 2 million of its own people to starve in a famine in the 1990s. The UN says that North Korea abducted thousands of people from neighboring countries following the Korean War and currently imprisons about 100,000 people in brutal labor camps. That statistic comes from a UN panel commissioned to investigate the human rights situation in North Korea. Its report, released in February, paints a picture of a regime that really has no parallel in the scale of its cruelty and oppression. The challenge that movie studios and theaters face is real because they have to balance the issue of freedom of expression with safety and commerce. But they've made a mistake. I understand it well. In 2009, Yale University Press published a book on the Danish cartoon controversy, but refrained from publishing the actual offending cartoons of Prophet Muhammad because of fears of retaliation and violence. As a trustee of the university, I was asked to defend the decision. one I would not have made. Swayed by my concerns for an institution I love deeply and a group of administrators I respect greatly, I made a statement supporting the university's actions that I have always deeply regretted. The right response then and now must be to affirm freedom of expression. The U.S. government has to find a way to respond to this act of aggression on American territory. If not, North Korea will have gotten away with the worst cyber attack, as well as the most brazen threat of terrorism in recent times. It will be triumphant and emboldened. And surely, groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS will take note that the way to scare countries into submission is to threaten these kinds of attacks. At that point, the story will be about much more than a Hollywood comedy. For more, go to cnn.com/Fareed and read my Washington Post column this week. And let's get started. So let us get straight to Sony's side of the story. Joining me now is Michael Lynton, the CEO of Sony Entertainment, as well as the chairman and CEO of Sony Pictures Entertainment. In other words, he is the boss at the companies behind the interview, the movie that provoked the North Korean cyber attack and threat. The president says Sony made a mistake in pulling the film. Did you make a mistake?
No, I think actually the unfortunate part is, in this instance, the president, the press, and the public are mistaken as to what actually happened. We do not own movie theaters. We cannot determine whether or not a movie will be played in movie theaters. So, to sort of rehearse for a moment the sequence of events, we experienced the worst cyber attack in American history and persevered for 3.5 weeks under enormous stress and enormous difficulty, and all with the effort of trying to keep our business up and running and get this movie out into the public. When it came to the crucial moment, when a threat came out from what was called the GOP at the time, threatening audiences who would go to the movie theaters came to us one by one over the course of a very short period of time. We were completely surprised by it and announced that they would not carry the movie. At that point in time, we had no alternative but to not proceed with the theatrical release on the 25th of December. And that's all we did.
So you have not caved in your view?
We have not caved, we have not given in, we have persevered, and we have not backed down. We have always had every desire to have the American public see this movie.
Why not release it online in some form or the other, video on demand?
There are a number of options open to us, and we have considered those and are considering them. As it stands right now, while there have been a number of suggestions that we go out there and deliver this movie digitally or through VOD, there has not been one major VOD, video on demand distributor, one major e-commerce site that has stepped forward and said they are willing to distribute this movie for us. Again, we don't have that direct interface with the American public, so we need to go through an intermediary to do that.
Mitt Romney says, why not just put it on YouTube and let the whole world see it?
That's certainly an option, and that's certainly one thing that we will consider. But again, all of this has transpired so quickly that we're trying to weigh the options as to how we can get this, what to do, how to go forward with all of this. We were taken by surprise by the theaters, which is what we wanted to do first, and now we're trying to proceed and figure out what the next steps should be.
The president says I wish they had talked to me. What is your response?
My response is that a few days ago, I personally did reach out and speak to senior folks in the White House and talk to them about the situation and actually inform them that we needed help. The FBI has been with us now for several weeks and has been great, but I did reach out and explain the situation to them at that time.
So the president is wrong when he says that you did not reach out to him?
Well, I don't... when he's asking about reaching out,
I wish they had talked to me first. Is the
right? So we definitely spoke to senior advisors or a senior advisor in the White House to talk about the situation. The fact is, did we talk to the president himself and talk to him about what was transpiring as the theaters started pulling back and being unwilling to distribute the movie? No, but the White House was certainly aware of the situation.
Not only did the theaters all pull out, but you couldn't get any of the major Hollywood studios to support you. George Clooney writes that he put out a petition and tried to get support. He couldn't get a single person to sign it. Have you been surprised at the fact that nobody has been willing to rally around you?
I am surprised, frankly. I mean, I understand on the one hand that my fellow studios and everybody else has their own commercial concerns, and they themselves were worried about becoming the target. And it did make this entire enterprise to be a very, very lonely affair. But on the other hand, this is a moment where you would expect the industry to rally around and support you.
Is it fair to say, or is it your estimation that the theater owners panicked because the North Koreans do not appear to have the capacity to launch some kind of major, simultaneous, or really any significant terrorist attack in the United States? Why do you think they panicked?
Well, what I can only imagine is Homeland Security came out that day and said that there was not a viable threat. And my sense of it, having had the conversations, was there was enormous pressure put on them by the malls, by the shops in the malls, by the surrounding neighborhoods who were threatened in those emails to say that they shouldn't show the picture. And they basically, on the basis of it, looking at that, they decided that they wouldn't take the picture.
Does that mean that DVD release also becomes difficult because you would face the same challenge, which is the Walmarts and the Costcos of the world would have to agree to stock the DVD?
Again, we don't have a direct interface with the American public, so we would require either through online or in a retail situation, we would need distribution. And yes, it's fair to say if we can't find one of those large retailers or many of those large retailers to sell our DVDs, we wouldn't be able to provide them with the interview.
But it feels to me like, is it fair to say, Michael, that your hope and expectation is that the movie will be seen by people?
We have always wanted the American public to see this movie. We have worked tirelessly to do so. So absolutely, we would. That's been the primary objective throughout.
When we come back, I will ask Sony's Michael Lynton when he knew exactly he had a problem.